UFC 273 has snuck right up on us, and with it come two really good title fights and some other really interesting fights for the contenders and up-and-comers for the title. It's a really interesting card from top to bottom, even with some fights dropping out, and it's even added a fight. But let's dive right into it with the always interesting early prelims. Starting us off from Jacksonville, Florida, 7-0 Pierre La Fiera Rodriguez takes on the 7-5 Kay Hansen, Hansen being 7 years younger and no other real points of measure in this. Now, Rodriguez is making her official UFC debut off her Contender Series win, but the bigger thing here is that of her 7 wins, 5 have been KO TKOs. None of them came in the first round, though. She is not a fast-paced finisher. Rather, she seems to maintain pressure throughout, building to those. She makes use of the takedowns to build control and the ground and pound. In her Contender Series fight, she outstruck her opponent 43-36. This is significant strikes. The actual landed strikes were different. And she racked up 3 takedowns off of 13 attempts for 4 minutes, 18 seconds of ground control. Hansen, on the flip side, is a bit more of a ground-focused fighter, and even absorbed and landed in at least 1 takedown in her UFC fights. Her accuracy isn't great at 21%, but it also seems like she hasn't been able to find the submissions in her last few fights, which before the UFC seemed to be something she was really good at. Now, the favorite here is Rodriguez, and I'm going to agree. It's nothing against Kay Hansen. She has a great future in this, and she's going to keep improving. But I think Rodriguez here is the hot hand, and in terms of takedown aggressiveness, I think Rodriguez is able to match her, at least in this fight. Kay Hansen could easily win this. I think she's entirely capable of it. I just think Rodriguez, being the hot hand, has the advantage. 14-2, Vince from Hell Pichel looks to keep winning against the 11-0 Mark the Olympian Madsen. Most boring nickname on this card. Madsen being 2 years younger at 37 and no other real measurements here. Now, Pichel is an odd bag to look at. He has solid striking with 3.42 landed, 2.49 absorbed, and oftentimes he outstrikes his opponents in his wins. However, he also has a very high takedown average at 3.29. And on that note, it tends to be multiple takedowns stacked throughout a fight. It's not one in constant control, it's multiple throughout the fight. Madsen is a bit of the same, though, with a high takedown percentage, 4.33 throughout his fights, with his landed and absorbed being 4.33 and 3.62 respectively. He did seem to struggle against Clay Guida as he didn't have a single takedown and managed to win by split decision, but that could be an outlier to the overall case. Now, a bit of a short section, but Vegas here likes Pichel, and I'm going to actually disagree. I think this is a close fight. I think the power and takedowns of Madsen will play a difference in this fight. Pichel could easily win this. I just think that Madsen's ability to grind these takedowns the way he seems to have done in his previous fights, aside from Guida, give him a slight edge here. 17-5, Julio Arce looks to rebound in the UFC debut of 8-1 Daniel Wiley Cat Gustavo Santos, with Santos being 5 years younger. Now, Arce has been a little streaky as of late, going 2-3 since 2018, but he does have some pretty good skill on the feet, with a 4.14 landed and 3.05 absorbed. It's a little bit of a finisher with 5 KO and submission wins, but then 7 decision wins. He also is susceptible to being finished with what seems to be like some issues against several opponents. Santos is another kind of mixed bag. He has 4 KO wins, 1 submission, 3 decisions. His gas tank seems to be a strength of his, as a good chunk of his wins came in later rounds. But other than that, he seems a bit kind of that standard kind of fighter, where he kind of doesn't excel in anything, but he's kind of a rounded fighter. The favorite here is Arce, and I'm going to agree. I think Arce's experience and finish ability makes him a little bit more dangerous in this fight compared to Santos and his general roundedness and sort of spread of stats. But ending our early prelims, the 7-4 Mickey Gall looks to get back on track against UFC newcomer 7-1 Mike Proper Malo. Gall takes an inch in height and reach here. Gall is a ground-focused fighter with 1 takedown in all but 1 of his wins. He also is a finisher on the ground, with the majority of his wins being submissions of single takedowns. His striking isn't great, but it holds consistent for the heavy fighters. Malo is similar in regards to the ground-focused fighting, but seems to be more about working for the finish, based on his record and looking at how he won his other fights. Now, Vegas likes Malo, and I'm going to agree because I'm boring. On a serious note, Gall is just really streaky, and Malo has seemed more consistent despite his lack of UFC experience. Vegas generally tends to know things I don't, so I'm going to side with Vegas here, and I'm going to pick Malo, as I'm saying his name wrong. But on to the prelims, we have the heavyweights. 12-3, Jairzinho, Biggie Boy Rozenstruik looks to get back to winning against the 22-7 Marcin Tybura. Rozenstruik is 2 years younger and nothing else major in this fight. Now, I think we all know that Rozenstruik is a striker with a very good ability to finish, kind of par for the course for heavyweights. His striking percentage isn't the greatest, 2.8 landed to a 3.07 absorbed, but in all his UFC wins, he's finished it by KO TKO, and has 11 total. He also has a varied bag of strikes that he can throw and has shown an ability to go the distance and fight, winning it in the 5th or the 3rd. So his gas tank is very good for a heavyweight, being able to continue to throw these strikes throughout. Important to note for this fight, his takedown defense is a 75%, but despite that, he has struggled in fights with people like Curtis Blades and Cyril Gahn. On the flip side, however, Tybura is a much more ground-focused fighter. He averages 1.54 takedowns over his fights, and has proven the ability to finish the fight from there. He does have 6 submission wins outside the UFC, but here his weakness is the striking. He has a 3.65 to a 3.44, and he has been suppressed a few times on the feet by certain fighters. Alexander Volkov struck him 75 to 58, and Tybura went 0-16 on takedowns. Fighters that know how to handle themselves and keep themselves on the feet seem to kind of be good against him, being able to outmatch him striking and not go down. And going into that, Vegas likes Rozenstruik here. It's a narrow margin, but I'm going to agree. It's close on paper, but I think that Rozenstruik's experience and ability to survive and keep it standing put him above Tybura. And I think Rozenstruik's not exactly proved, but definitely has shown the ability to survive on the ground to get back to his feet. Now, Tybura is a very good fighter and a very good ground fighter, and I think he poses a major threat if he gets you to the ground. So this is very much a close fight in my opinion. I just think that Rozenstruik takes a slight edge with the experience and his ability to keep himself off the ground. 8-2-0-1, Anthony Fluffy Hernandez looks to build a streak against the 9-2 UFC newcomer Josh Fremd. That name just sounds wrong. Fremd is 4 inches taller, and I assume having a longer reach. UFC stats didn't list it, I didn't see it on SureDog. But actually diving into it, Hernandez is at best a weird fighter. He's ground heavy with 2 submission UFC wins and 6 total in his career. His takedown average is a 3.76, but that all comes from a fight against Jung Park where he racked up 6 takedowns. He does seem comfortable playing off the back, like in his fight against Rodolfo Vera where he had 0 takedowns but 1 by submission. However, Josh Fremd is a bit more rounded in comparison. He has a mix of 4 KO wins, 3 submission, and 2 decision. So outside the UFC, he handles the various ways a fight can go, from the ground to the feet, a little more than Hernandez does. However, Hernandez does have that UFC experience, and this is a decently close fight, and Hernandez is the favorite, and to be boring, I'm going to go with it. I just think that Hernandez's experience, and while he can play off any position, and his striking isn't great, but his ability to throw a takedown, I have not seen video of Josh Fremd defending a takedown yet, at least at the time of writing this. So I'm going to follow the numbers here, and I'm going to go with Hernandez. Fremd could win this, I just think Hernandez is the favorite here. Undefeated Ian the Future Gary looks to keep it going against the 5-1 Darian Weeks. Gary is 4 years younger, 5 inches taller, Jesus, and only takes 2 inches in reach. Tell me how that works. Gary, over this relatively short pro career, has been more so a striker and finisher than anything else. 5 total KO wins, and in the UFC is 100% takedown defense. But with only 1 fight, I feel like that tells us literally nothing. Going to Weeks, he's a little similar, majority of wins coming by KO. That's 4, and a single submission win. But in his UFC fight, we saw the takedown used a bit more often to some degree of effectiveness. In the end here, the favorite ends up being Gary, to the surprise of nobody, and I'm going to end up following. I think Weeks has talent, and in the UFC anything can happen, but looking at the numbers of the 5 inches of reach, 5 inches in height, and the more varied strikes Gary has thrown, it makes me lean towards him in comparison to what I saw in Darian's stats. But ending off the prelims, 9-2 Aspen Ladd looks to stop the streak of the 13-8 Raquel Rocky Pennington with Pennington being 6 years older and no other major measurements. Ladd is a pretty rounded fighter, a solid mix of strikes and takedowns in her fights. However, there is the caveat that her striking is about dead even, 3.64 to 3.93. Though she does have 6 career KO TKO wins, so she does have power in her arsenal. Also on that note, she seems to secure at least one takedown in every one of her fights, and from there she also tends to throw a lot of strikes. Pennington is the hot hand right now with 3 fight win streaks she's coming off of, and she does have similar traits to Aspen Ladd. Ladd having 3.66 landed to 3.21 absorbed and a 1.07 takedown average. With all that noted, Pennington seems to be more of a grinder in the UFC, majority of her wins coming close in regard to the striking. She also seems to utilize the submissions a bit more than Ladd. Famous favorite is Pennington, and I have to agree. I know it's boring at this point, but Pennington has a very rounded style, and despite its similarities to Ladd, she's the hot hand. She seems more accustomed to grinding it out than Ladd is. Well, this should be Kevin Gastelum versus Dricus du Plessis, but because we angered some Elder's deity, it's just not happening. I wasn't able to find out much. I saw it on Reddit. I kind of looked it up. This fight isn't happening due to Gastelum having to pull out of the fight. Du Plessis gets screwed once again. What you gonna do about it? And also an issue, this one might be in the wrong spot, but SureDog has this as a prelim, UFC listed as part of the main card. I don't know. But 59-16-1, Alexei Boa Constrictor Olenek looks to rebound against the 12-7 Jared the Mountain Vandera. Olenek being 15 years older and 2 inches shorter. That man has been in this sport far too long. Now, Olenek is your classic heavyweight grapple-heavy fighter. His striking and absorbed are dead even, and really not a strength for him. He has a career KO wins, but he doesn't seem to really use them, especially at this point. In terms of a ground game, he has a 2.16 takedown average and a 33% takedown defense. He seems able to throw off the back. I'm not sure how comfortable that is for him, but he's done it before and he's won from there. He mostly likes to dominate from the top or from a position where he's able to basically wrestle someone into oblivion. But the most important reminder here is that he averages 2.2 submission attempts with 46 career submission wins. Now, Vandera has shown up in the UFC as a bit more of a classical heavyweight. He has the even landed and absorbed and some very good some decent KO power, 7 in his career. To note, he does have 3 submission wins outside the UFC, so his bag of tricks does have that in it. But in the UFC, we haven't really seen that come in. He only does have a 20% takedown defense, though. So he's kind of a bit of a mystery yet to see if that's able to show up here or if it's something that he just was able to pull off against that level of talent. It's just an interesting question. But back on track, the favorite is, unsurprisingly, the one that's 15 years younger. But for honestly no real concrete reason, I'm going to disagree. I like Olenek. I'm a fanboy of him in some capacity. And despite the age gap, his takedown game and ground skills are a threat still. And I feel like Vandera has struggled and will struggle with that. The 20% takedown defense isn't great, and someone like Olenek, who likes dominating from the top position and is more than content to grind out points from that position, I think that's a weakness here, and I think Olenek might be able to exploit it. Now watch Vandera knock him out in the first. But moving on, 11-2, Mackenzie Dern looks to bounce back against 13-5, Tessia the Tiny Tornado Torres. Dern is 3 years younger, 3 inches taller, and takes 3 inches in reach, 3-3-3. Now, Dern is a ground-focused fighter with a very good submission game and ability to play from her back. Doesn't have any takedown defense, literally she has a 0%, which supports this, but she also has shot takedowns before, which opens up possibilities for how someone would approach her, in theory. Her striking is not that great, with more absorbed than landed, but with a ground game like this, that's not surprising. You kind of expect it. Torres is a bit different. She has a bit more of a penchant for striking, 4.71 landed, 3.61 absorbed, but she's not a finisher. She has 1 finish by KO and 1 by submission. She's a striking grinder, which is still a little odd, but it's interesting to see. She does have the ability to throw takedowns and can do it consistently in some fights. She also has been shut down before. In a recent fight against Angela Hill, she went 1 for 7 on takedowns. She did win the fight, but she outstruck Angela Hill and the takedowns didn't do anything. So it seems like the takedowns are more, if she can get them going, she'll use them. But when they don't work, they're not a factor in the game. Vegas is running with Mackenzie Dern for this, and I'm going to agree. The ability to play from her back and other positions make her dangerous already, and she's shown the ability with her takedowns to get a fight to the ground, and having to approach that makes her dangerous to plan around. Moving on to what is basically a co-main event, which if there wasn't a 2-title fight card, this would be the co-main. 20-4, Gilbert Dorihino Burns looks to stop the surging 10-0 Kazmat Boris Chimaev. I said that wrong. Burns is 8 years older, 4 inches shorter in both height and the reach. Now, I think we can understand that Burns is a decently well-rounded fighter. He's a 3.12 landed, 2.90 absorbed, and a takedown average of 2.16. Going back to his striking, he's not a huge power puncher, only 6 career KO wins, 3 of those come in the UFC. And he also has been knocked out by better strikers with more power, Kamaru Usman and Dan Hooker. His main strength, as a result, is his takedowns and ground game, since that's where he builds up a lot of his strikes and time on top. Since almost every single one of his UFC wins, he has at least one takedown. Jumping over, Chimaev is very similar in regards to being rounded, but his stats are ludicrously skewed right now. He's only had 4 fights, and every fight he's taken, I think, a singular punch. He's ended them all in the first round, either by wrestling them into submission and submitting them, or knocking them out. See Gerald Mearshart and I believe Rice McKee was a knockout. Yeah, he slammed him in the corner and knocked him out. He has power in spades, and when it comes to his takedowns and strikes, there's a killer instinct there that he has. Now, unsurprisingly, the Vegas favorite is Chimaev here. I'm going to disagree, partially because I'm a contrarian, partially because I have a small feeling that Burns is a different kind of fighter here. Burns has the ability here to flip the script and keep it on the feet. His striking isn't his strength, but if he's able to keep it on the feet, he puts it in a position where Chimaev hasn't faced this level of talent yet, I'm willing to say. He hasn't faced a high-ranked contender. If Burns is able to hang with what he's learned and the skills and experience he has a decent shot to win this fight. Probably, honestly, going to decision is his best bet here. But I'm going to go with Burns, thinking that Burns' experience can flip the script. But finally, to the 2 main events. We have the 20-3 Aljamain Funkmaster Sterling, looking to keep his belt against the former champ who doesn't know when it's legal to throw a knee, 16-2, Peter No Mercy Yan. Should be dumbass. Yan is 3 years younger, but has 4 less inches of reach. Now, Sterling is a decently rounded fighter. He has a heavy emphasis on the striking, especially with 4.84 landed and 2.2 absorbed. And additionally, it's very much a dynamic style of striking that makes use of his athleticism to change levels and throw a sheer variety of strikes. He does have the ability to take down fighters and is pretty effective at it with a 1.77 average across his career. However, it isn't always a permanent part of his game, and it has been shut down against fighters, going 1-17 against Yan in their previous fight, for example. Speaking of Yan, he's very similar. He's a 5.98 landed to a 4.14 absorbed and a 1.75 takedown average. The major difference comes from how Yan moves and his ability to get knockouts and knockdowns. He thrives more with power and the ability to put an opponent on the ground. Makes use of a lot of trips and hip tosses as well, which is very dangerous when you're trying to engage on the feet. He moves very fluidly and has very good boxing. He's able to generate a lot of offense in a lot of different situations. Now, the favorite here is Peter Yan, and I'm going to agree. And I'm kind of going to quote the last fight here. The last fight ended because of an illegal knee, but in my opinion, Yan was winning that fight. I don't really know if anything else has changed. Yan has fought again, and he still looked good in that fight. Sterling hasn't. So I don't know if Sterling has adapted or evolved, but based on their last fight, I think Yan has the advantage. Obviously, Sterling could have adapted and evolved, but based on what I know now, I'm going to pick Yan. But we're at the main event. 23-1, Alexander the Great Volkanovski looks to keep his belt against the 17-6 Korean zombie Seung Jung. Volkanovski is 2 years younger, but Jung does take 3 inches in height. This is according to Sherdog. It's 1 inch on the UFC fight for some reason, so I love the consistency here. But it only takes an inch in reach. But I think we all can kind of sum up Volkanovski in our own heads, but he is a great striker with a monstrous 6.42 landed to a 3.34 absorbed. Coupled with the variety and the cardio he has with these strikes, it's a dangerous combination. Now, he has not been much of a finisher in the UFC, only 3 KO TKO wins. But it's the quantity of strikes that he's able to pour on that is great. He does have the ability to throw takedowns, but they aren't so much a main focus and seem to be more of a game plan and a situational thing. They're not something he's going into a fight unless it's specifically planned for. And that brings me to my big point where his best strength is. He knows what to do to win, and his corner helps him with it. He has the skills, and his corner tells him where he's at in position, and he always seems to be in a good position. Now, Jung is a bit of a different story. His striking isn't as statistically good, but he's a finisher. He has 6 KO TKO wins and 8 submission wins. The low striking differential has the equalizer of his power to put you to sleep. His grappling is also monstrous because while he doesn't shoot often, he has the ability to throw vicious submission attempts when he does take you down. He also has a great gas tank and can go the distance putting the pressure on. And I have to bring up his chin given his nickname, the Korean Zombie. He's hard to put down, and sometimes it doesn't look like he's going to go down. But Volkanovski is the favorite, to no one's surprise, and I'm going to agree. He has a very solid base, a deep set of skills, and a very good sense of his position in the rounds and where he's at. However, I do think Jung can win, but he has to make his moment and keep control of that moment. He can't let anything slip away. In a nutshell, that was UFC 273. It's going to be a hell of a card. You have a lot of really good talent. A lot of really good questions are going to get answered. We're going to see Chimaev fight somebody who's higher ranked and probably matches his skill level. And we'll get an idea of who's the challengers in this division. We got Volkanovski, Jung, which will be a great fight in itself. And then we've got Peter Yan, Aljamain Sterling rematching for what should be a great fight there. Overall, 273 is going to bring up a lot of questions and then answer a lot of questions. I think it's probably going to be one of the better cards of this year. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you have questions about how I come to these conclusions, or if you want to yell at me for doing something wrong or saying someone's name wrong, because God knows I did. Thank you for watching.